Previously on Transformers University, we took a two-part look back at the 1986 film Transformers the movie, and now we're going to dive a little bit deeper as we talk with filmmaker, producer, restaurateur, and world-class nerd extraordinaire J.C. Reifenberg right now on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to episode 52 of Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Bricali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO, the toy archive, the social media, the YouTube channel, and this podcast and more. And today, oh man, do we have an episode for you. If you liked the last two episodes, if you liked our look back on Transformers the movie from 1986, you're going to love this conversation. Some of you may know J.C. Reifenberg's work. I know J.C. Reifenberg from work. Not presently, but J.C. and I used to work together at our old gig for Major League Baseball at MLB.com. I actually used to work for J.C. for a couple of seasons, and then J.C. moved out to L.A., and he was our freelance camera guy, and he worked for me for about a season and a half as my L.A. guy. There is not more that could be said about JC's work ethic and knowledge of film. He is one of the hardest working people I've ever met. To give you a story of one of the times it's about a year after we had started working together, it was the start of the 2006 baseball season. And at MLB in those days, budgets didn't kick in until April 1st. So that means if you were doing some sort of computer upgrade or whatever, your group didn't have the money until April 1st. Now, if you're familiar with baseball season starts plus or minus a few days around April 1st. And the season actually, 2006 season kicked off officially, I think, on April 1st or March 31st. And we were switching over from PCs to Macs for all of our video processing. And so on April 1st, the IT gang was working like crazy to get everything working, but nothing worked properly and nothing worked quickly. So it was taking us hours to process video. And to give you an idea of the technology at the time, we were breaking ground as a group, as a company, by being able to send baseball highlights to people's cell phones in under 2 minutes. So that should give you an idea of the technology that was cutting edge at the time. Nonetheless, there were a handful of us, myself and JC and two other people, that worked crazy hours those 2 weeks. And it is the biggest hourly paycheck I have ever made in my life in terms of hours. I had worked, and I was not a full-time employee, I was a freelancer. I had worked in those 2 weeks 80 hours, your normal full-time gig of regular pay, and 81 and a quarter hours of overtime pay in those 2 weeks. So I had essentially worked an entire month plus in those 2 weeks. And there was only, I think, one, maybe two other people that worked more hours than I did. And one of those people was J.C. Reifenberg. Now, that's J.C.'s work ethic. You may know J.C.'s work. J.C. is a phenomenal cameraman, cinematographer. He is, you may know him from Absolute Value Pictures, which is a production company owned by Kevin Smith. You may know him from various Kevin Smith projects. He also produced a documentary called Return of the Jedi, and a neat little film called Hughes the Force, where it's a Star Wars fan film kind of told in the style of a John Hughes picture. You may also know his restaurant, the Scum and Villainy Cantina in Hollywood, California. It is the home of the podcast Fatman Beyond, formerly Fatman on Batman, and JC is the producer of that show as well. And you will hear him on that show. They'll refer to him passing around the mic, getting audience questions. So if you ever attend Fatman Beyond, say hi to JC, tell him you heard him on this podcast, and maybe he'll let you get a question in to the show live. So, like I said in the previous episode, I love when my friends go on to do big things. I love when my friends and my former coworkers succeed and go on to bigger things. And so it always makes me happy when I hear JC being mentioned on a show or seeing his name pop up somewhere in my feed. And so I felt like he was the perfect person to tap for this conversation. Now, you may have heard me on another former coworker of both of ours, Seth Everett, his podcast Hall of Justice, and JC has been on there as their Star Wars correspondent and is Star Wars insider, as Seth would say. And they broke down The Last Jedi, and JC really did put that film in a space for me where I enjoyed it, but I couldn't really see what was wrong with it. He certainly pointed out the things that he felt was wrong with it in a very intellectual, smart, and story-driven way. So, I felt JC was perfect for this conversation about Transformers the movie. And when I reached out to him, I never realized how big of a fan of this film he was. So, just in some direct messages back and forth between me and him, I realized this was more than just having him as a clip in the previous 2 episodes. I really wanted to sit down with JC and pick his brain on this film. And we did. And even more, we talked a little bit about the Bumblebee film from last year. We touched slightly on Netflix's Voltron. And so if you're worried about spoilers for Bumblebee, I would stop here. We don't really get into spoiler territory with Voltron. We definitely don't get into anything story specific. So no worries there. And of course, if you haven't seen Transformers, the movie from 1986, why are you listening to this show right now? Stop it, pause it, and go watch the damn film. So with that said, here is my conversation with JC Reifenberg.
Okay, cool. I love Transformers. So we can talk. We'll talk. This will be fun. I've never done a Transformers thing either, so I'm super excited about that. I get to talk about, Anyway, all right, let's just jump into it. So I don't.
All right, so start with me. I know you mentioned when we were talking on Twitter, like, you got. Tell me your first experience with Transformers the movie.
Well, I mean, I'd like to introduce myself with the universal greeting and say "Ba wheat grana wheat minibon" to everybody who listens to your show. The first time I saw Transformers the movie was actually a huge buildup. I was 5 years old in 1986, and I had just heard about Transformers the movie. And this was pre-internet. This was like kids at school who got to go see it, or like my next door neighbor who was 6 years older than me who like got to go see it in the movie theater and just could not shut up about it. And so the hype in a pre-internet world was insane for little 6-year-old JC. And it was, I think, my 7th birthday, and I literally still remember it. I had this giant box, and it was from my brother, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be Triptychon. I cannot wait. And I opened it up, and there was a smaller box wrapped up inside the bigger box, like a package within a package. And I never, I'd never seen that before. I thought that was so cool. And then I ripped the paper off, and it was the old white box of Transformers the movie, like the original VHS, where with the artwork with Ultra Magnus, with the I think he's pointing his gun kind of towards the camera, and Unicron's up at the top, kind of looming over them. And I freaked out. I freaked out in a way that I haven't even done for Star Wars, like when the special editions came out or the new movies. It was like unbridled exuberance. And the moment my family left, I just wanted to rip through packages. And I did end up getting Triptychon that birthday. I just wanted to rip through all the packages as fast as I could so that my brother and I could go and sit in my mom's bed, because we only had one VCR in the house and it was in her room, and just watch Transformers the movie to see what happened. And we had already seen, this is after kind of the post-movie, so like we knew who Rodimus Prime was, and I already had a Galvatron toy. So like I was filling in the backstory on these toys that I already had. Oh God, it makes me so happy to think about it.
So did the movie live up to your expectations?
The movie did live up to my expectations, and it still is a movie that I probably watch 3 or 4 times a year, and since then have tried to collect all the different versions. So like the one where Spike swears, like I had to get that one, and then like the recolor timed version that's a little bit wider for the 20th anniversary, like I had to get that one, and then there was another version where like, oh, I can't even remember, but like
Probably
I
the
would
the,
go to
the
top
oh, I was gonna say there's the UK version with the Star Wars like scroll at the front,
that
and
that's
there
the
was a
one.
Blu-ray.
Yes, yes, I got that one, and then and I was going to like Wizard World Chicago to try to find these things. Like I was ravenous about that movie, and I still literally to this day watch it probably 3 or 4 times a year. It's one of my like go to have the movie on in the background. I just think it's like such a well told classic tale uh of succession and leadership.
You wanna go a little deeper into that?
Yeah, I mean, like, so I'm a filmmaker and I've studied story and film and watched a lot of war movies. And that's what this is. I mean, it's Transformers, so it's heightened and a little over the top and ridiculous. But this is Transformers the movie is a war movie. It is a movie about an old general who is who lays his life on the line as a demonstration to all of the people under him about like who you can be at your best and who you need to be to come out on top at the end of the day. And watching Ultra Magnus fail, watching kind of the second in line to take the spot fail, and kind of this underdog rogue kid step up to the plate. It's almost uh, like King Arthur in a way, you know. I think they really tapped into kind of a human story or kind of a mythic succession story in a way that the Michael Bay movies didn't even consider. I don't see Transformers the movie, the cartoon, as a popcorn movie or as a cartoon. Like I mean, even as a kid, like it's pretty adult. One of my best friends, who's a few years older than me, remembers seeing it in the theater. And when Optimus Prime dies, he was beside himself. He wanted to leave. He didn't even want to see the rest of the movie. That is not something that happens in the world of kids TV today. It just doesn't happen.
Or then,
Um,
I mean, that's probably you think back to the '80s, that didn't happen often, or even the idea of a show or a line where we gave you all your favorite characters that you knew, and we got rid of them all, and here's a whole new set. We're starting over. Here's the reboot right now.
yeah, and what's funny is like if you watch like your show, The Toys That Made Us, um, in like a very 2018, 2019 snarky way, everybody's like, oh, well, they did that to sell more toys, which is probably true. But to me, it's completely justified within the story. Like they didn't just say, hey, Optimus Prime's dead, buy all these new toys. They justified it. They gave an emotional attachment to the characters on why you should care about Rodimus Prime, why he is the right guy to succeed Optimus. Like they justified any sort of capitalistic intent with a story and a depth to the new characters that you can't help but fall in love with Rodimus Prime. You can't help but want to cheer when he stands up to Galvatron and opens the Matrix at the end. Like, it's, oh, it drives me crazy. Like, I love that movie so much, to the point that I've actually, like, in my head said to myself, like, if I ever make like a live action war movie, I would use the kind of plot beats of Transformers the movie, because I think it's perfect. Like, there's
Yeah.
no way you can't become attached to those characters.
No, you're absolutely right. I don't think I've ever heard anyone reference Transformers the movie in terms of being a war movie. I've heard it in terms of being an animated feature and a sci-fi movie, and it's a lot of ways a something that took a lot of story beats from Star Wars. But I've never heard it referenced as a straight up war movie, and I'm just like, my mind's blown right now, because I never kind of looked at it through that lens.
If,
One of the things you
if,
mentioned. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you replace Transformers, like Decepticons, with North Korea, and you set it, I mean, you'd have to set it a little bit further than the year 2005 now, but like, let's say the year 2050, right? And you replace the Decepticons with North Korea, or, Russia has almost like a Red Sun type situation where Russia has taken over the world, and you've got this rebellion of people who used to be a world superpower, and our hero, whoever the John Connor of the United States, sacrifices himself, and you have this amazing story of this kid who, if I were making the movie, I'd give him a last name like Lincoln or Kennedy, right? Stepping up to lead like kind of the changing point in that war. Like, it's like Academy Award winning plot points. And I know that sounds, I sound ridiculous saying that, but like the basic story of that is so humanistic, and just is the perfect story for war. It's I'm not even making any sense because I'm so invested in that movie.
It's funny. Do you feel, sometimes I see it, especially after seeing, did you see Bumblebee, by the way?
I did see Bumblebee.
Okay. After seeing it, I thought it was really well done. And I think if you put nostalgia aside, if you put your love for the film aside, if you can do that, I feel like I've said, I think Bumblebee might be the better film. Um, but I also feel like people get very clouded with that love for this film, because it's had 30 years to kind of um, gestate inside of people and grow. Um, do you feel there can ever be a Transformers movie as good as this one?
I think so. I mean, it's not like the plot of the movie isn't completely new like it is in The Matrix, right? When you saw The Matrix, you were just like, oh my God, I don't even know what I'm watching. This is incredible. I've never seen anything like this. Where like you could probably go through history and pick out quite a few movies that follow the plot of Transformers, the movie. So I think if you did, I think there would be a way to do it. I think if you enjoyed the first 5 minutes of Bumblebee, which is like pure Cybertronian nostalgia amazingness, I think that they could probably do it. I think the hard part would be you would have to not speak down to the kids. You'd have to somehow capture a generation of kids through like if you didn't want to just make it a nostalgia bomb for people like you and me who are just like, I saw RC, I saw Brawn, I saw, oh my God, like the Starscream transforms into the Cybertronian version of this is amazing. If you weren't going for that, you would have to find the new group of kids who don't have that emotional attachment necessarily to those character designs, and build basically just a really compelling story. Like, take one of these classic mythical stories, you know, and build your movie around that, and hit the like 7-year-olds who grew up loving Transformers Prime, or, you know, Beast Wars is like my version of new Transformers, even though it's 25 years old. But hit that. And I think you probably could, with time, it will age very well. I don't know if Bumblebee will age the same way as the animated movie. I think, you know, Bumblebee was Transformers number 6 or 7, right? Isn't that
6 if you don't
how
count.
many of those have
Yeah.
they done?
That would have been the 6th after the 6th live action one, 7 if you count the original, you know, animated film.
Yeah. Okay. So it's number 6. Now, to be honest, I watched the first one and couldn't stand it. I watched the second one and I haven't watched any of them since. I went out to see Bumblebee because it looked like it had a real story. Like, I couldn't tell you in the first Michael Bay Transformers, like, there's like the blonde girl who's part of something, but she doesn't really need to be in the movie. And then they have like the comic relief is like John Leguizamo or somebody. I'm like, what are you doing in the movie? Like, it's so convoluted, and the plot is so like overdone. It doesn't need to be. It's like all the new Terminator movies also, where it's just like, look, you have machines versus man. The machines are winning. Tell the story about how man overcomes the machine. That's as easy as it needs to be. And like, it's so gets so convoluted. Bumblebee, I think, really succeeded in that it was a story about a robot without a family and a young girl who felt like she had lost her family. And it was about their connection. And like, had Bumblebee been the first Transformers movie, I think, one, it probably would have done a lot better, even without the nostalgia bomb. And I think if you continued to build off of that, where you're telling a human story that involves robots, right? Like something like WALL-E did. I think that those, I think that could be huge, and I think you could reignite Transformers in a completely new way. I don't know if you're going to be able to get over all the other stuff.
Yeah, I think the Bumblebee
At
movie
this
came
point.
the Bumblebee movie came a little late for what it was. And
Mhm.
they actually reworked. I was reading up on it a few weeks ago. They reworked a lot of stuff. So like that Cybertron scene at the beginning and a lot of things mixed in there. Those are all like post first screening add-ins. There was a whole
Oh,
World War
really?
II storyline that got cut. They went from being like somehow in the original universe to being a very gray area reboot of the Michael Bay films. But you know,
Mhm.
you made one point there about not talking down to the kids, and I don't think Transformers, the original '86 movie, does that, which is one thing that drives me nuts about like the current state of Transformers visual media, so like TV and film, is the
Mhm.
idea that Bumblebee can't talk, and I feel like that is a way they talk down to kids in a way. Like I want to hear Bumblebee
Yeah.
talk because he's the representation for the kid, and the kid has no voice.
Mhm.
Then you're in essence talking down to them.
Oh, that's really smart. I never even thought about that. But you're muting the voice of the child in the show,
Yeah,
which is crazy. And then as soon as you do that, the child doesn't identify as strongly with the characters on screen, and they're going to go play Fortnite.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. Exactly. You know, I want to bring it back a little bit here. You know, have you ever noticed the parallels? I mean, there's huge parallels to Star Wars. I was just wondering if you've ever, you know, felt, do you feel it's there's a bit of homage here, or is it a bit over too much? You know, I can count 4 or 5 things right off the top of my head that are basically directly pulled from Star Wars and Transformers the movie.
you know what's funny is I I fell in love with Transformers before I fell in love with Star Wars. So in my head, I may have even I probably didn't see that movie before Star Wars. I know I didn't, but that movie, I can remember the first time I watched that movie, and I can't really remember the first time I saw Star Wars. So I never built those connections. Like honestly, you're like, I've got 4 things that are the Transformers knocked off. And outside of like the opening crawl that you mentioned in the UK version, like I'd like to hear what you have to say, because I would never associate the 2 things.
Okay, well, so
Isn't that
Unicron
crazy?
being the first, a giant planet-sized thing that destroys other planets. There's RCE's got the buns on her ears, like Princess Leia. There's a training droid with fighting with Hot Rod in the scene where they're escaping. And the notion of the Matrix versus the notion of the Force, like using the Force at the end versus using the power of the Matrix at the end. They're all kind of they're very very similar themes.
Okay, so this is very weird. I'm going to defend Transformers the movie against Star Wars.
All right.
This will be the only time this ever happens. The training remote is a gimmick. I don't really think that you can say, like, yeah, that's a knockoff, but like it's a knockoff in such an inconsequential way, right? In Star Wars, the training remote is used to as a device to get you into the concept of the Force, right? It's a device that to give Obi-Wan Kenobi a reason to talk to Luke about the Force, and then show that, oh, Luke has this magical power. In Transformers the movie, Hot Rod fighting that training remote has nothing to do with anything. It's background noise to show he's distracted before like the Galvatron ship shows up, right? So
right.
Like it's used in a completely different way. Completely different. Like in Transformers the movie, it might be like a little wink to Star Wars, but like there's no critical information that comes from that scene. Where in Star Wars it's the exact opposite. Unicron is sentient. The Death Star is run by men. So Unicron makes his own decisions, cannot be reasoned with. So it's a planet that destroys a planet, but I don't necessarily feel like that's you know what we should do? To me, I always saw Unicron as like, who's the biggest robot? Metroplex, or Superion, right? Or Devastator. Like, let's make a thing that's bigger than Devastator. Well, what would that be? Oh, let's make him a planet that destroys planets, similar to the way they did Fortress Maximus at the end of the US run, where it's just like, just make it bigger. What were the other 2? Oh, the concept of the Matrix versus the Force. I don't know. Again, like, those are kind of mythic archetypes. And in Star Wars, it's pre-midichlorians. It's just this thing that's generated by life, whereas the Matrix gains its power from the goodness of the Autobots that came before, right? So again, it's a token device. It would be more similar to me as if as the Schwartz in Spaceballs, right? Because it's like, Lone Star, use this ring, and that gives you the Schwartz. And it's like, that to me would be more analogous to the Matrix of leadership than necessarily the Force. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just biased because I have such a strong childhood attachment to that movie, but I don't really see it.
No, you might be the anti-bias here because you defended the Transformers film over Star Wars as someone who owns an intergalactic space cantina.
Yeah,
and
I don't know. I mean, when you delve into kind of those mythic archetypes and storylines, there's not a lot that. I mean, everything kind of pulls from the same stuff, right? It's how you reskin it.
Mhm.
You know, almost any first-person shooter you play, you're playing Doom. You know, or Duke Nukem 3, or not Duke Nukem, Wolfenstein, right? Everything's kind of a derivative of that. It's just like, instead of demons, let's make it Nazis. Instead of Nazis, let's make it this. So I don't know. I think people are really. I don't think there's very many original ideas out there. I think everything's kind of a derivative of something else, and the trick is, how do you reskin it? How do you update it? How do you make it relevant for today in a way that it wasn't, like, in a way that people wouldn't identify with the same way? And I'll give you a perfect example, which is going to make everybody groan. But Jar Jar Binks in episode 1 is the intent of that, and they never came out and said it, which I think they should have, was he was meant to be a silent film, a representation and homage to silent film. So if you're familiar with Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin, a lot of Jar Jar's physical comedy is basically almost lifted shot for shot from old Buster Keaton movies. Like, the example I'll give you is when he is hanging on the Trade Federation battle tank, that is Buster Keaton hanging on the clock, which then they do an homage to in Back to the Future as well, right? Is Doc Brown hanging on the clock. And you know it's an homage in Back to the Future because at the beginning of the movie, he has a cuckoo clock that has Buster Keaton hanging off it. So these ideas are reskinned, recycled, reused over and over and over again. And the reason they do that is because it's familiar. It's a language that has been in our society for so long that you instantly understand it without having to go into an in-depth explanation.
And to bring it full circle, to the Back to the Future reference, the voice of Kranix, the alien that gets caught by the Quintessons, is Lou, the diner owner in Back to the Future.
Nice. Hey, can we talk about how amazing the cast is?
So yeah, Leno, let's talk about the cast, because I actually just posted, and I'll say in the video, I just did a Meet the Cast episode of the podcast where we kind of broke down all the cast people and other things they've been in, kind of putting faces to the names of everyone that was in the movie. So, and you find like random things like David Mendenhall, who was the voice of Daniel. He was, Sylvester Stallone's kid in Over the Top, and then like he was in an episode of Different Strokes. He was. It was the episode that had Nancy Reagan telling kids don't do drugs. He was the drug dealer in the schoolyard.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't even know that, but just if you look at the opening credits and you start with Leonard Nimoy, like, what? That's insane to play Galvatron. And here's the other crazy thing that they did is they let, like, and I know it would be blasphemous to do it today, but back then Peter Cullen did Optimus Prime, so it wasn't like they took iconic names and actors and put them with the new characters, but they let the old characters be Casey Kasem or whoever. Then, John Machida is Blur, the Micro Machines guy. Like, of course. How could you not? But the big one, and the one I always talk about, is Orson Welles. That was his last acting role, I believe.
You're correct.
And that is something I use for trivia all the time with my nerdy film friends, is I'm like, what was Orson Welles' last role? And everybody's like, oh, it was something from the 70s. I was like, no, it's Transformers the movie. Which is like this incredible, and now, like, look, by that time, Orson Welles wasn't the same as Citizen Kane Orson Welles, but what an awesome little footnote for Transformers the movie to be known as the last thing Orson Welles ever did. and he's incredible. Like, it's Orson Welles, you know, it's Leonard Nimoy, it's throw the other ones at me.
You got Robert Stack as Ultra Magnus.
Oh my God, Robert Stack as Ultra Magnus, who was Elliot Ness. Like, they didn't. I love that they didn't. Like, they were going for a big blockbuster movie. You're casting a big blockbuster movie in that cartoon, you know? And it wasn't even sound-alike. Like, now maybe, you know, you'll get somebody who sounds like Johnny Depp to do the Johnny Depp part. But, like, they just went for it. And they got, like a sci-fi icon to come in and play the new bad guy. Like, it's so, I feel like the people making that movie actually cared. Like, I feel like they actually wanted it to be a good movie. I feel like they actually wanted to see kind of how far they could push the ability for a child to understand what is going on. And I, like we talked about earlier, I don't think that people do that anymore. Everybody's afraid of getting canceled on Twitter. And so I don't know if you'll ever see, like, programming that is directed only at children be that good. Although I say that, and, like, the new Voltron on Netflix is really good.
It's stellar. I try to tell everyone I can about it.
Yeah, but I don't know, and maybe it's just because I'm old. I don't know if it has. You know what the great part about Transformers the movie is it does something similar to what the Voltron series does, which I haven't seen it last season, so don't.
You know, I'm halfway through season 7, so I'm right there with you.
Okay.
I'm a little further behind than you, actually.
But and it's a big thing today in that everybody's like, why would I do a movie when I could do a 10-part TV show and I get 10 hours to develop these characters versus 2 hours? But there's something magical about the brevity and the saturation that you have to tell this character's story in 2 hours. Like, if you have 10 hours to tell it, it's almost easier to tell the story of Shiro or Keith or one of these characters. If you had to tell Voltron in 2 hours, how do you do it and keep the potency? How do you do it and make people cry when this person dies or cheer when this person succeeds? And that's something that Transformers the movie does really, really well. You know, I guess kids have a backdrop on who Optimus Prime is when he dies, but even within the movie, you know, in the first 15 minutes, they do a very good job of introducing you to him as a leader and having him be almost like a god walking, where they're like, you know, they're under attack. Like, the only person who can save us is Optimus Prime. The only person who can save us is Optimus Prime. And they build him up in a way that even if you hadn't seen the first 2 seasons of Transformers, you still look at this character through the eyes of the characters you know have been introduced to in that movie as a demigod. They really devote time and dialogue to character development in a very potent, efficient way.
They do. I do think, you know, the viewer, especially the younger viewers, were helped along with having known who the characters were from the show. I think that's what might have given them a bit more of an emotional impact, because if you look back at, like, reviews of the movie, like, say Siskel and Ebert, like, they pan the film because they're like, I don't know what's going on at the beginning. And you know, more or less. So you know, I'm probably really paraphrasing that down a bit. But I mean, I think, to your point, I think you're right, and that, you know, they set it up. I don't know if they set up the emotional involvement as well by not having that, you know, 2 seasons of TV show in front of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know though. Like, is it a product of, like, Siskel and Ebert just, like, being film snobs? Like, does it really need, like, if I showed my nephew the movie first, I don't know if he really needs to know, that Optimus Prime fought Megatron on an oil rig. Like, I think what, oh God, I sound ridiculous. I think it may have been a little bit ahead of its time in the way that today movies drop you into a world and you're expected to catch up. I'll go back to the Matrix again. Like, you're dropped into this world where people can fly across buildings and they all wear weird S&M stuff. And as you watch the movie, you kind of get caught up with it, right? But for the first half hour of Matrix, you're like, I don't know what, red pill, blue pill, what's going on? Like, the character designs are so cool, you're willing to go along for the ride. And your understanding of that universe kind of catches up to the movie at the same point that Neo understands the new universe. And I think that, would kids scream and cry and run out of the theater when Optimus Prime dies without having seasons 1 and 2? Probably not. But would they understand the emotional impact of him as a leader, him as somebody that was seen as their only hope, and he's gone, and that Unicron is still out there? I think so. I mean, I can't remove the fact that I used to watch Transformers on WGN from my experience watching the movie, but I feel if I try to step outside of that a kid would understand that the Autobots are in trouble when Optimus Prime died, even if he's only in the movie for 6 minutes at that point.
You're wow. Again, you floor me sometimes with your analysis of this stuff. Like, I never, I didn't think of them as two separate things, and it's absolutely true. If you look at them as, the emotional attachment and the context within the story, you're absolutely right. It's funny, man. I was saying to Seth, I was on his podcast, and first thing I said, I listened to that JC episode about Last Jedi, and I'm like, it changed entirely how I felt about the film after I had just seen it. Just picking up on things, and there was one thing you said about story, and I've been kind of plugging into my head, and I had it in my head when I was watching Bumblebee, was the thing, like, if you see a gun, it's going to show up later, and something along those lines. And watching Bumblebee, there's a videotape of her diving, and she used to be a diver. She is going to dive in this movie at some point.
Yeah, but they did it, like, I love that in Bumblebee. I watch it with my fiance, and look, is it a little telling? Is it a little heavy-handed? Yeah, but, like, when she's climbing up that thing, like, I audibly got excited. I'm like, oh my God, she's going to dive. Like, I wanted to see her do it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think you need to hide your cards so much. Like, it was so satisfying to watch her do that in that movie. Like, I got excited. I turned to my fiance. I'm like, oh my God. And I pick up on these things because I have years of screenwriting. And I turned to her and I said, oh my God, she's going to have to dive off the thing. But she's going to do it because she finally has somebody that understands her. And sure enough, she did. Neither here nor there, but the same thing happened in, what was that Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hardy movie where he eats the bear liver?
Oh, the Revenant?
The Revenant. There's a scene in The Revenant where he, like, picks up a tree branch, right? And I looked at my fiance, and I'm like, he's going to use that tree branch to prop himself up to make it look like he's propped up on the horse to lure Tom Hardy out, and then he's going to fight and kill Tom Hardy. And, like, 6 minutes later, it happens. And she was pissed because she's like, you just ruined a huge moment for me. But for me, it was so satisfying because it was almost like a puzzle I got to figure out. The example I use all the time is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. At the very beginning of the movie, when Indy's teaching class, archaeology is the search for truth, not whatever. If you're looking for or it's a search for fact, not truth. If you're looking for truth, Dr. So-and-so's philosophy class is down the hall, right? You're showing Indiana Jones as this practical guy who doesn't believe in the boogeyman. Then his gateway, his like cantina entrance into that world is he's at an old library, and what does he have to admit? 3, 3, 7, 7. And there's a great shot where he goes up the spiral staircase, and there's a giant X on the floor. X marks the spot. Those are those little things that, like, your hero is one step ahead of where the audience is at, and it's so satisfying for the audience when they figure out what's going on. It's just good writing. Last Jedi is devoid of that. Sorry, I had to throw that shot. I had to throw the shot in there.
You know what I liked about you didn't like Last Jedi, but the thing I appreciated was you didn't like it for completely different reasons than I had heard leading into the movie. And I think it was refreshing to at least hear like a more critical opinion of story and things that could have happened or that should have happened, versus people being just outraged for various reasons.
Contrary to the popular opinion, you can dislike Last Jedi without being a Nazi or a misogynist.
But to bring this back to Transformers the movie, talking about foreshadowing, I think the Bay films kind of lack this, and the Bumblebee has it to a good extent. And when Optimus gives up the Matrix in Transformers the movie, Ultra Magnus doesn't catch it. He misses it. Hot Rod catches it, and that's like your first real great piece of foreshadowing that this is going to be important later.
Yeah, absolutely. And they let you sit with it. Like, by the time you get to the point where Hot Rod gets his hands on the Matrix, like, you have stored that little piece of information that he catches it in the back of your head. You've waited for him to repossess the Matrix, and he doesn't, and he doesn't, and he doesn't. And as soon as you get to the point where he's like, you're like, oh, he's not going to do it. It was like a bait and switch. Then he, grabs it off Galvatron and opens it. And then you get further satisfaction because not only does your hero succeed, Hot Rod is the older brother, right? If you're Daniel, Hot Rod is your older brother, your cool older brother, and you get to watch your cool older brother succeed. And then it's a Transformers movie. You get to see him transform.
Yeah. Wow. You figuratively and literally.
Yeah. Which, again, like, maybe that's kind of corny as it comes out of my mouth at 38 years old, but it's satisfying. There's something satisfying about it, even today.
Absolutely. And I want to pivot here just to one other thing, because I think you're kind of you're an aficionado of this more so than I am, and people who listen to my show know I love heavy metal, but I tend to slant towards the harder side of things, and I've never met a hair metal aficionado such as you. And you have the credits to back it up, right? You've done stuff with Motley Crue and some other things with some of their tours and their videos. Am I right?
So 6 a.m. But
okay, with Nikki Sixx is back.
Yeah.
Okay. So just give me your feelings on the soundtrack.
First off, to pick that to put in a kid's show, like, people forget now, listening to hair metal because they played at the grocery store, that back then they wouldn't sell Motley Crue albums at Walmart, right? So to pick that genre of music, which had been like, vilified and called trash, to like, hey, we're going to sell this to 8-year-olds. One, bold choice. Two, the first two songs I put on the jukebox at Scum and Villainy were Dare and You Got the Touch. Because there is a small percentage of nerds who, when they hear that song, it is a time machine for them. And they're whatever age they were in 1986, when that song goes crazy and Optimus Prime wrecks the Decepticons. It's I when I was in high school, like I didn't even know that you could buy that soundtrack. And one of my friends in high school brought it to school one day. He's like, "Look at what I got." I didn't even go home after school. I went straight to Best Buy to buy it. And it is, there was a long time when anytime I got in my car to drive, I listened to that soundtrack, Instruments of Destruction. And then when I was in college and Napster came out, I searched Napster for Lion, NRG, like all of those bands to try to find other stuff that they had done. I mean, I still love it to this day. I still listen to it to this day. And in a world now where like Sweet Child O' Mine or Smoking in the Boys Room is on every radio in every supermarket in the world, like sometimes it's nice to drop in like The Hunger by Spectra General and like hear hair metal that hasn't been played to death.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually just talking about this with a coworker of mine. I was like, on like Sirius Radio, they have they have Hair Nation, which is the hair metal station, but like it really only focuses on either the hits of those bands that fit that kind of genre, or songs they put out around the time those songs were hits. They don't really do like, hey, Def Leppard put out 2 albums in the '90s. You want to play one of those songs? Never,
Right.
never anything like that. I'm like, there's a missed market there, but these, it's funny. You mentioned NRG. They were at a Transformers convention one year, and they had like a table, and it was kind of sad because they were there for like the first day, and by the middle of the first day, they just like nobody was showing up to talk to them. It was probably a few years too soon. Like I don't think the nostalgia had set in for the music just yet.
Oh my God, I would go there and just be like, give me all of your albums. Like it's so much fun. And it all kind of has a kind of an aggressive, darker feel that I really think fits with the tone of the majority of that movie. When you've been listening to those songs, which are a little aggressive, not really uppers, right? For that whole movie. And then you've got Vince DiCola, who did Rocky, or did at least the later Rocky movies, doing the score for the movie. And even that is kind of like electronic and dark. And at the end, when You Got the Touch comes on as the one of two, like, I mean, You Got the Touch is like got to be one of the most uplifting songs ever written. And you've got from Dare at the beginning of the movie to when they play You Got the Touch, there is not a happy song really in that movie. When that song comes on at the end, it's like this giant relief and this giant emotional release that that you need. Like it all enhances the stuff and informs the stuff that comes before and after it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I'm probably more of a Dare. Like Dare is the track for me because it moves.
I agree. Me too.
It pushes that whole scene. But yeah, I mean the touch and the fact that it's been reused in other. It was in Boogie Nights and it got a little bit of a quick nod in the Bumblebee film. It shows the. It feels like you said before. I feel stupid saying it sometimes, but like the cultural impact of this film.
They've used it like they used it in Glow, I think, or did they use Dare in Glow?
I don't know offhand, but I did hear something. It might be Dare that was in Glow. I'd have to look it up.
Dare is such a good song.
Oh man! All right, so JC, any parting words about Transformers the movie? Give me if there was someone who somehow listens to this podcast but has never seen this movie or has never seen it the way you see it, what would you tell them?
I would say when you watch the movie, if you've seen it before and you don't like it, go rewatch the movie and don't look at it as somebody trying to sell toys. Look at it as heroic archetypes. And at the end, imagine putting World War II generals in the same situation. Imagine Tom Hanks is Optimus Prime and Tom Cruise is Ultra Magnus, and you've got, I don't know, Zac Efron is Hot Rod, right? Does the movie change in your mind? Is it your bias against cartoons? I would venture to say yes. If you haven't seen the movie, it is the best representation of what of Transformers at its best. You know, the original 3, More Than Meets the Eye, is really good. Return of Optimus Prime is really good. There's a couple other episodes in there that are really like kind of clever and smart. But like, if you had to sell Transformers in 2 hours to somebody and make them fall in love with it, it is Transformers the movie.
Yeah, as I call it, it's the centerpiece of the Transformers franchise.
Mm-hmm.
JC, how can people get in touch with you if they want to come to your restaurant? They want to reach out to you on social media. How can they get in touch with you?
I am at Reifenberg on Twitter. I am JC Reifenberg on Facebook. I am. You can just come to the bar. I'm there a lot. Scum and Villainy Cantina in Hollywood, California. Let's see. I just started doing the Instagram thing that all the kids started doing 10 years ago. So if you want to see pictures of my dogs and things like that, you can find me on Instagram at JC Reifenberg.
Cool. All right. So JC, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And that just about does it for this episode of Transformers University. I really hope you liked that conversation. Going back and editing it, I forgot how much fun that conversation was because there was a bit of gap between when I put this together and when JC and I talked. But if you like Transformers the movie, don't worry, we will be talking more about that and some other adaptations in future episodes. But next time on the show, we are switching over to the toy line. We're going to talk about the 1986 toy line and specifically about the Autobots of that year. And of course, if you want to talk more with me on social media, please reach out to me on Twitter at TFU_info. That's usually where I am. You can also catch us on Facebook, facebook.com/TFU.INFO, Instagram.com/TFU.INFO. The YouTube channel, please subscribe, youtube.com/TFU.INFO. If you want to join our Patreon, you could have heard this episode a week ago, and you could be privy to some more special events and show topics, and lots of stuff on there. Patreon.com/TFU.INFO. Finally, don't forget the website, the Toy Archive, world's longest running transforming tour archive, www.tfu.info. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner-operator, madman behind TFU.info. Till next time, see ya.